So this section is about the stat choice, or say the stat priority. Let's first put aside the perception rate, because one interesting about Bard is the note melody itself has an additional 10% of perception. So let's first look at other stats. You might find out that the overall compactness, or say the speed of your rotation, is based on your sprint, because you keep seeing, right? You keep seeing, and the cooldown of your note melody and mirror heart is affected by your sprint. So sprint is the first priority, and then it's the mastery and power. These two really depends. For the IC builds, I mean the IC note melody rotation and the IC thunder rotation, you might find out from your DPS meter that most of your damage, almost 100% of the damage, just except the Ice 1, just except the Ice 1, which is very low, are related to your mastery, are affected by your mastery. So for IC builds, mastery higher than power. But for the fire build, the optimal choice is the transients with a appropriate sprint level. At this build up, the fire 1 makes up like between 10% to 20% of the DPS. So this thing is not affected by your mastery. So for a fire build, the priority is sprint, then power, and then mastery. And for all builds, the critic is numerically worse. So the crit is the last choice. So after these four stats, we go to perception. Actually, perception is quite important because in this game, the system check if your damage is miss or not, then crit or not. So perception is quite important. But you see, the note melody has a 10% extra perception rate itself. So for a thunder build, well, there are around 10 to 20% of the note melody damage, you have to control the perception rate between 90% to 100%. Right? Not exceeding 100, but not less than 90. And for the IC note melody rotation, in which the note melody will make up around 30 or even more percent of your DPS, it's not very good to have a higher percent of perception. So the optimal choice would be controlling your perception rate at 90%. So these are the choices of your stats. And there is a very interesting thing is that you don't need to choose perception at the early game, because the effectiveness of the transferring rate between the stat of perception from your gear is lower than the effectiveness of other stats numerically. So you just need to avoid perception from your gear. So in later game, when you have more soul forces, you can choose the Huben. You can choose the Huben in your soul force like map. But in the early game, it's better to choose Lupus earlier than Huben, because Lupus gives you like additional sprint, which is more important than your perception. So you might just leave the perception rate aside, and in later game you can come back to it, but not exceeding 100% for Thunder build and not exceeding 90% for a note melody build. So that is the stat. Okay, it's not very complicated.